Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. It's another episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And on today's episode, we're talking about martial arts school management software. It's a subject that I think it's pretty important. If you have a school, you either have software and you're thankful for it, or maybe you don't have software. But anyway, we're going to dig. We're going to dig into this. And I'm glad that you're here. If you're new to martial arts radio, please go to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com for all the things that we've got going on. We've got a email list. You sign up for it, you get a bonus book. There's all kinds of great stuff there. And of course, all of the things that we do as an organization to support, to connect, educate, and entertain, to get everyone in the world to train for 6 months. You can find that at whistlekick.com. Now, on today's episode, I'm joined by three people. One of them you might know. Victor, welcome back to the show.
Always happy to be here.
Victor and I talk like every day about something or other. And of course, we have two other gentlemen joining us. Brad, welcome to Martial Arts Radio.
Thanks, Jeremy. Happy to be here.
And Alan.
Hey, folks. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Glad you guys are here. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know that we sometimes do episodes that are about a subject, but they involve people who work in the subject. And that's what's happening here. Brad and Alan have a company. And why are we here talking to them? Well, we're going to talk a lot about, you're going to find out why as we go through this episode. But standard disclaimer, if you've been around a while, you've heard me say this. This is not a sales pitch. This is not a commercial. Our effort with this episode is to give you objective, actionable information from people who work in the industry. And yes, at the end, we're going to talk about their solution to the industry. It's not the only solution, but we think it's a good one, and that's why we're talking to them and not other folks. The reason I say that is because I don't want you to tune out right now. I want you to say, okay, I'm going to listen. Maybe you're reluctant. That's okay. But this is going to be a good episode. And those of you out there with schools, I think you're really going to dig this. Even if you don't have a martial arts school, if you have a business, you're going to learn stuff about this because we're going to be talking about things at that level. So I think before we get into the technical side of things and the subject, I think we need to speak to everyone's relationship to martial arts and martial arts schools, because that's how we get to the software piece. And Victor, I'm going to have you come in at the end, but Alan, how about you? What's your relationship to martial arts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'd say it started as, really purely a, investing thesis, where I looked at the industry today and versus what it was like when I was a little kid, and just seeing the sort of the secular trends in the market and looking at how popular it is today, and there are martial arts celebrities and you can watch it on television and everybody's talking about self-defense. It's just a very different ecosystem now than it was, say, 30 years ago. And that's kind of where it started. And then, once I got involved in Martialytics, it's become amazing. I talk to, martial arts business owners almost every day. And it's, an amazing community of people, and I really, really enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think is really interesting about what we do as an industry and the people on the outside of it is I don't think there's an industry that people without direct experience have a more positive opinion of. Right? People generally think very highly of martial artists and martial arts schools, and yeah, there are exceptions, but I love that we've cultivated that perception in the general public over time.
Totally true. Yeah, I agree with that.
Awesome. Brad, your relationship
Yeah,
to martial arts.
I agree with that as well. I talk to martial arts owners every day as well, and we're talking to people from every single market around the world, and it's similar across the whole spectrum. Everyone wants to build their community, teach their art, just get fit and have fun and share their knowledge. And it's sort of a universal trait across everything. But you asked about my background with martial arts. I'd sort of been doing martial arts since I was, I think, 6. I started
Mm.
doing Taekwondo
Which
back
is
in the
like
day.
what, like 9 years?
At least 9 years ago. Thanks for that. I'll put that to the back. 42. What?
No.
Um, Yeah. So started back then, and doing all the forms and things like that. I'm actually acting at people that are listening. Um, but
And yet
yeah,
another
just
reason those of you out there who only listen, which I get it. I'm listening to the most recent episode in the car right now, but you miss stuff when you don't watch, right? And it's the fun little bits. But please keep going, Brad.
yeah, no worries. But yeah, when I was a bit older, I started getting a bit more serious into just doing Chinese kung fu style called Choi Lei Fut Boxing, which
Mm,
is kind of a niche, long range striking style. And I got really into that and was teaching started as a junior instructor and worked my way up to being a sort of a senior instructor and then a disciple of the Sifu there at the time. But we had something like 300 to 400 students at any given time in 2 locations, which is quite a big school.
that's a
But
lot of.
we were using paper to track everybody, like cards for attendance, um, and paper for billing and things like that. And I could see from the admin people how just frustrating it was. And we had no idea how many kids were there or how many students were there.
Mm, yeah, and let's. I want to leave that part on a cliffhanger,
Mm.
right? Because that experience that were cards or spreadsheets or whatever. It's a common thing, and we're gonna come back to that. But that Chinese martial arts style. What was the name of that?
Choi Lei Fut Boxing.
Okay,
So there's
okay.
3 different Choi Lei Fut styles, and that's one of the. It's called Northern Victory.
My brain is really trying to hear Chow Yun Fat when you say that.
It's the Aussie accent.
Well, maybe we should acknowledge you because most of our audience is in North America. You are you're Aussie. Are you
I'm
still in
Aussie.
Australia?
I
You're
live
in
in
the
the
UK
UK.
now? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my accent goes in and out. So it might be confusing for people, especially the Americans.
I work really hard. I am from Maine, again living in Maine. I try to make sure my Maine accent doesn't come through because even 25 years in Vermont, when my Maine accent came through, my friends would say, "What?" So we this is my radio voice. If you know me in person and we're out in the world, you might get a little bit different flavor. Speaking of someone who has traveled a bit and might have picked up and put down some accents at times, Victor, of course, you've been on the show a whole bunch of times, so we're not going to do your whole relationship to martial arts, but let's set the scene. Give us the brief on you opening a martial arts school.
Yeah, well, at the time of recording this, we are a little less than a month from our second year anniversary for the school that my wife and I started back in 2023 when you asked the fateful question of why aren't you teaching yet? And here we are. And it's
For
going
those of you
great.
out
This
there
is
who
the
think
second school.
for those of you out there who think I only poke at you, because there are some of you out there who um, maybe you get on the phone with me or you email with me, and I push everybody, and Victor's a good testament to that.
Oh yeah, and for good reason too. Um, I am very cautious by nature, and so I need people to push me a little bit into that uncomfort. And it is going great. We still have lots of things that are uncomfortable with people and things, but this is the second school that I have run. The previous one was in Florida by myself, which already made it like already having my wife as my partner is amazing. But also the one in Florida was two different locations with a health and fitness facility where parents dropped their kids off while they went and worked out, and then a church. So that's two entirely different demographics of students
Hmm.
that I was merging together, tracking everything on my phone via Venmo, PayPal, and those things, and checks. I think I still had one parent who paid via check when I taught in Florida. Yeah, and it was just that's I mean my everything that I do kind of is related to martial arts. It's a weird question for me
Yeah, I
because I'm always constantly thinking. I substitute taught yesterday, And during my planning periods, where they normally send me to another classroom to cover someone's lunch break, I was working on a complicated schedule revamp that we're going to do on the other end of our second anniversary. So I was lesson planning, but for our school, not for anything having to do with the public education system.
I think for a lot of us in the martial arts space, martial arts is what we talk about, think about, do in various ways, 24/7. And so we're going to talk about the needs of a martial arts business and how various software components, whether it's, what you guys make or other people make, cobbling your own system together, because I think martial arts businesses are businesses. The needs of all businesses, while they differ in the detail at a macro level, are the same. And there is no one size fits all. If there was, that would be the size. If there was one martial arts style that was the best for everyone in all situations, that's what we would all do. But clearly, that is not the case. So we do have options. Now, um, Victor, you've run 47 businesses in different industries.
I've worked for 47 businesses.
Alan, I know you've been involved in a number of things. Brad, we heard a little bit about your story, and we'll go into that in a moment. I've been involved in a variety of businesses over the years, and when I take a look at what is, because I also consult with martial arts schools and other businesses, and I want to get all of your feedback on this. The thing that is the primary killer is an aversion to collecting money. How many of you would agree that, especially in smaller businesses, it's that I don't like the money part of it is the first thing that kills them?
Definitely the
Yeah,
first hurdle to overcome.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen it a million times in different software companies. It's it's an aversion to the whole subject matter, because especially in like smaller companies, because you feel so close to the customer, and there's often a personal relationship that blends with a business relationship. If I'm selling widgets to sort of nameless, faceless corporations, then I don't really care. But when a family comes in with their children, it's a very different dynamic. And there's also not just an aversion to kind of talking about money with people that you're close to. It's also sort of a shyness about charging a fair market value. Like you feel like you almost are obligated to do favors for people.
Because you
And
like
it's
your people,
okay.
you like your customers, you want to help them, you get to know them, you know that they just had this massive car repair or whatever
Yeah,
else, and and I just want to help them.
yeah, right. And it's tricky, and it's a hard thing to balance. I'm not saying that there's necessarily like a silver bullet for that, but certainly, automation and sort of like, disassociating yourself from some of those things can help. Um, and then also just, being comfortable and confident in the value that you're providing to people. At least those are the things that I've kind of seen that have worked as like a mindset change, almost more than anything else.
Yeah.
Kind of comes down to that imposter syndrome, doesn't it? Like if you feel like maybe you second guess your own value, and you feel the last hurdle to overcome is that putting a price on it and asking for money.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell all of my clients is that you are not your target demographic by definition. You know enough or value enough or have the experience or whatever that you're able to serve other people. And if you treat them as equals, you break the value exchange. And you have to be able to separate from that. Well, what I do isn't that special. No, it is, because that's why they want to come to you. That's why they want to pay you. That's why they want the thing that you make, the service that you provide, right? Um, Victor, what do you got to add on this pile?
Yeah, the imposter syndrome thing is Karen and I talk about that all the time. I
Mm.
was sitting at home just the other day, and one of my families, they're a homeschool family, and they have a daughter who's in high school, and she messages the business not about martial arts, but she's like, hey, I'm writing a research paper on different styles of martial arts, and I was wondering if you could give me some background on karate, jujitsu, and the specific style of kung fu that we teach bagua. And I, for a moment before I started responding, I'm like, why is she coming to me for that? Oh, because to her, I'm Shihan. I'm the expert.
Right.
And you have said to me multiple times that I am not my demographic of audience, because there's so many times where I'm trying to think of prices and I'm like, well, I gotta ask people. I used to hate the first of the month, which was the day that I sat down and went down my student list
Why
and
did you hate that?
sent payments. Well, one, most of my students, when we started this school with my wife, they were either friends of my children or they were classmates or schoolmates of my children.
Mm-hmm.
And my previous experience with that was with people who, we'll just say, thought that because we went to the same church, they should get a discount.
So
I
what I'm hearing
gratefully
is you hate it, and I'm hitting this point because you're not alone. A huge portion of people out there, and I know people who don't run a martial arts school that want to run a martial arts school because they don't want to have to deal with this. It's the idea that when I go through and I look at the first of the month of who has and has not paid, it means I have to have awkward conversations with people, and I don't want to have those awkward conversations. Right? Am I right?
Oh, 100%. And then like
Yeah.
3 weeks after the first, or 3 days after the first of the month, you have to like go on Venmo and like hit send reminder to all those people and other text messages. And I hated it.
Absolutely. Brad, you mentioned let's go back. So you kind of started to serve it up, and it's time for us to come back to that point. You'd been training a while and started to get involved in the back end of the martial arts school that you were at, and you said 300-400 people across a couple locations. Victor and I are talking about, this is a painful point at 10, 20 students, 30
Mm,
students. It only gets worse when we get up, 10x.
yeah. It's interesting because that's generally how people tend to start schools. Is they start small and they start with who they know, people they've worked with before or trained with before, and then their friends and friends of friends. And it's only until you get to that arm's length point where they're not immediate, sort of close to either you or your kids, that it becomes more comfortable to ask them for the money. So it's kind of like this, you're really pushing things up a hill, and then it gets a lot easier when you get over that little hump. I think it sort of hits around 80 students,
Hmm.
tends to be the sweet spot. But yeah, it becomes difficult, but that's sort of almost where you need to sort of take a step back and sort of remove yourself from the equation a little bit and just sort of rely on some automation there. And then you can sort of be like, well, it's just automated. The computer just does it. It sends out those reminders. It sends out if you've missed a payment or something like that. It's not me chasing you. It's just the system I use so I don't have to worry about that stuff.
I'm going to make a statement here, and I'm curious if you all agree with me. And to me, boundaries are really important in a martial arts school, as a martial arts student, as a martial arts instructor. Drawing and holding people to boundaries is really important because if the boundaries are flexible, they don't understand their role, and thus it can become really difficult to understand where success is in their efforts. And I've got decades of experience running businesses, and looking back early on in my professional career, that was the thing that I did most wrong. I was, like Victor's talking about, well, we had this prior relationship, we had this other thing. I knew they had a difficult time going on, so I would compromise the boundary being, you're going to come and consume this service, purchase this product, I'm going to charge you this amount. And they expected it was going to be this amount, and now it's that amount. And it broke the boundary, or at least bent the boundary for them. So they didn't quite know how to act. Alan, you've gotten involved in a number of businesses in a number of different ways. What do you think of that observation of mine? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I would say that it's most common to see that among business founders and owners. And
Yes.
generally speaking, I've come in, you know, after that stage. And it's one of the things that I mean, I think Brad would probably tell you this, like that I've often kind of, talk to people about and encourage them on is like, hey, we've got, a really good product here, or there's a really good service we're providing. Like, let's not be shy about, because you can always look at a lot of these same problems from the other direction. Like, I
Mm,
come in and I have great empathy for my customers, but I also have great empathy for Brad and my partners. And
mm,
it's like we work really hard, we try our best, and sometimes being a great service provider or sort of a great business person often involves intense empathy for your customers and their needs, and that's really important, and you shouldn't fight it. But you also have to consider yourself as well, um, not in a selfish way, but in a sort of dispassionate, disconnected way, if you can. Just try to sort of put yourself on in an out of body experience and sort of just look at the situation dispassionately if you can, and am I being rewarded, or am I treating myself fairly, honestly? And sometimes the answer is no. You're treating your customers extraordinarily well, often, or at times at the expense of treating yourself unfairly, and that doesn't help anybody because that doesn't scale forever, right? Then your business goes away and it doesn't work, right? And
and
now
that
That's
I
the
want
yeah.
I want to underscore that because again, we're in an industry where not only do most people start martial arts schools for reasons other than making money, right? Most people open a business, they're like, yeah, I'm going to get rich. Most people who open martial arts schools think this is a continuation of my journey, which is good because a martial arts school is probably opening one is probably not the best way for you to invest your time, energy, and money if financial return is the only thing you're looking for. There are probably lots of other things you could do. Now, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, I encourage you to do it. But if you do not charge adequately, if you do not manage the money piece well enough, at some point, your school will go away. And I've known a number of schools that have fallen victim to this. Victor, you're nodding your head. Brad, I'm sure you've met some, know some school
Well,
owners that
especially
have
in this economy.
yeah, yep. Yeah. If you don't get this part of it right, nothing else matters. And I know people who stretch it out or they build a school such that they don't need to charge. It's in their garage, they have limited number of students, and that's great. And if that works for you, by all means do that. But that is not what most people set out for. Most people say, it would be awesome if I could have this school, make my living, and do this dutiful thing that I feel really positive about. Brad, how were you at your school managing hundreds of financial collections when you started working on that?
But see, I wasn't doing that. I was more interested in teaching, but
Okay.
it was I was sort of supplementing the main teaching staff and being a part of that and sort of helping with curriculum and that sort of thing. But I did spend a lot of time at the front desk and watched
Mm,
how the admin staff were really scratching their heads if there was an issue with someone missed a payment or trying to sign somebody up to a new plan. They had to fill out paper forms and send them off, and then they were locked into contracts. And if something didn't work, trying to get someone on the phone if you're halfway around the world or something like that. It was
yeah.
just compounded things that you just don't want to have to deal with. And that's only if you're lucky enough to have some admin staff to help you. If you're a school owner, often you're teaching as well, and you're just a one-man band or a one-woman band, and that just compounds even more in that sort of situation.
So what you're talking about here is an almost universal experience, right? How do most martial arts schools start? One person, maybe they have an assistant, maybe it's their wife, right? Their husband, their senior student, whatever, from another school. and they find a space and they have a handful of students and they're doing some marketing and people are showing up. And what I notice is it tends to reach this critical mass, 20, 25, 30, 40 students, somewhere in there, where somebody says, okay, the the pain side of this is too much, right? Every business, right? Ellen, would you agree? Every business has this dip where you don't want to be, where it's too big to be easily manageable, but not big enough to hire the help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So and different people are going to draw that line differently depending on how they manage their school. For me, I observe that in that like 40 to 50 range. Not to say that managing a 20-person school isn't painful, not to say that managing a 100-person school isn't painful. The pain is just different, but on the other side of that dip you usually have the resources to get some help to make those things a little bit easier. So Brad, what paper, we're back in the paper days, right? A lot of people watching or listening to this episode remember filling out paper forms for everything, not just martial arts, but did didn't you guys have a transitional point where you started to move in a direction?
Yeah, we started looking. I think there was a company called Champions Way that they were using. The school was using at that point, um, and they started to use that for billing. I think it's usually the first step for people is just trying to automate their billing,
Yeah.
because billing is obviously a necessary evil. If you don't bill, you don't exist. Um, but that's where the headaches also come in because if there's someone everyone knows if a card expires, for example, and you need to chase someone up to update their card details, and you only know when it fails the payment, and then it just creates this knock-on effect. So they were using that, and then we're still using cards to track people's attendance. And I have a background in design, web design, and I was
Hmm.
working in advertising at the time. So I thought I could make something that was just to track attendance, so we can get rid of these cards and at least see who's there,
What do you
how
mean by
often they come.
cards? People were coming in
Like
and they'd
like
pull
a
their
like
card
a
out of a
literal
pile,
piece
or
of card. Yeah, exactly. Like a piece of cardboard that's got your name on it. You have to go through it and find your name, and then you put that in the I'm here pile, and then the admin person would have to go through that pile of people that were there and tick a box and put the date on it. So for hundreds of kids, so it took a long time,
yeah.
and obviously it was prone to human error and things like that. But there's no quantifying that either. So you've just got a stack of cards, but how do you visualize that information? How do you know if someone's coming, unless you really go through it all the time, and no one's got time for that. So that was the idea of just building something to track that attendance. So you
Hmm.
just check in, I'm here, tracks the date and time, and then you've got something you can graph and then maybe get some insight into from there.
And know, because for me in the martial arts space there are three R's. There's revenue, we've talked about that. There's retention, and then there's recruitment, right? And honestly, those are the order in which I recommend schools focus on them. But we're talking about retention right there. If someone hasn't shown up in a few weeks and you don't recognize that they haven't shown up in a few weeks, you're missing the best opportunity to reach
Mm.
out and say, hey, is everything okay? Because the moment they
It
go to
really is. Yeah.
non-renew,
It's too late by then. It's the first indication is if a student's regularly coming every sort of two or three times a week, and then they start dropping down to just twice a week, and just then to one, or that sometimes they just don't show up at all. They may not send you a message, but then that's your first sign that they're either unhappy with something or something in their personal life has changed. But it allows you, if you know about it, you can reach out and talk to them about it.
Victor, because you've worked 197 jobs, and yes, I'm going to continue to increment that number because it's funny to me when I do that. Victor, because you've worked in so many different jobs, this thing that we're talking about, catching people when their behavior changes, that's a core component, I'm sure, of a number of businesses you've worked in.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting because it's always something that has been tracked in a lot of different jobs. Like you always have regulars, right? Like I can still remember some of the specific coffee drinks, a venti chai latte with no water, steamed to 180 degrees, that a truck driver would get every single morning.
Wow.
And if it was
That's
not
that
the
is that
exact
is some
temperature,
specific memory.
I just had to remember you were
right?
talking
Yeah,
in Fahrenheit then because that sounded dangerous.
yeah.
Once a day, Victor tried to kill someone with a hot cup of coffee. That's how
That's gonna melt your
resilient this
face.
this truck driver was. Yeah.
The tracks, yeah.
God. But so you have your regulars, but it in the realm of gym type memberships, you have I've worked for some fitness locations that were more chain styled, and we loved the people whose billing would go in, but nothing else would like they wouldn't go in. Um, we called them bill payers, uh,
Uh-huh.
and so tracking behavior on on this side of things, especially because I barely know what date it is. I always know what day of the week it is because it's whether or not what class I'm teaching in the
Hmm.
dojo. But there are some days where I'll feel like I haven't seen someone in months, but then I'll go back and look at our system for checking in and be like, oh no, they were just here last week. Or conversely, I'll be talking to people and I'll be like, so yesterday when I was showing you this, and Karen will nudge me, she goes, Victor, that was 2 months ago that you were teaching this.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah, yesterday. So like I have no concept of time.
Life is busy when you're head down, when you're focused, when you're trying to run your business, and you're inevitably going to focus on the parts you're passionate about, which for the martial arts space, if you're a martial arts instructor, you don't start a school to do the other things. You start a school because you want to teach. You want to share your information with other people as they come along. And then, just to acknowledge this is what we're doing. We're trying to set up for those of you out there a problem that you probably have. The question is, how severe is this problem in your life, right? That is the question, and only you can answer that. Are you at a point with your financials where you're going, man, this is a pain in the butt. I've got 40 students, and every month I'm chasing two or three or five people, or I recognize I have really good recruitment. I'm bringing a lot of people in, but I have a hard time understanding time, and my retention could be better because I don't quite see where they're dropping off, right? Like that can happen for a lot of people. And so we've been, I don't want to say we're dancing around it, but we've been presenting the problem without saying, there are software options available to you. And I'm sure doesn't come as a surprise to anybody out there. There are a variety of software options out there. If you have a martial arts school and your martial arts school has made it onto an email list, you have likely been solicited by somebody to say, hey, we have a solution to a problem that I'm sure you have. And whether or not you chose to explore that, or maybe you have software, right? The the question really becomes how significant, how impactful is this? And I'm working on bridging a subject here because you might have noticed Alan hasn't said anything in a minute. I'm gonna bring Alan back in because it's where the two of you, Brad and Alan, started working together that I find super interesting. So, but Brad, I'm gonna give it back to you because there's a little bit more in this story that I think we've got to say for the audience. So, um, you had a background in marketing and web design, and you started turning your head towards this problem that you had. Right.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of just naturally look at the tools and try to blend the two, really
Right.
two different passions. See if I could just make something just for curiosity's sake, if nothing
Mm-hmm.
else. Whether the school owners at the time would use it or not was more just I wanted to see what the frequency was. I just like data. Um, so yeah, that's was really the driving force for me. I just wanted to play with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was no business reasoning to it, but
What was the response? Because I assume since we're here and we're talking now, you produced something that was viable enough that you were using it internally at this school, right? I don't imagine you hit a
yeah,
wall and then you said, "Ah, this didn't work. I'm going to go start a software company," right? Like I
yeah,
can't see that
absolutely.
story. So what I'm curious about is as you got this this first version put together. I'm going to use the word hacked.
Mm,
And
accurate.
right, my degree's in comp sci. Um, what was the response of other staff, school instructors, front desk staff at your school when you put that out?
Well, it was really quite transformative. I obviously we talked about imposter syndrome a lot. I probably suffer from that greater than everybody, but once you put something out there, you sort of put a piece of yourself out there a little bit, even if it's hacked together. We got it out there, and we set up a little iPad at the front desk, and people were checking in on that. And every time they come to class, you check that in. And it's the same as putting a card in, except all you're doing is tapping your picture or typing your name in. And then we had suddenly had all this data that we could look at and go, okay, well, Monday nights is quite popular. Why are people coming in here at this time instead of a bit
Mm.
later? We want them to come in and warm up. And then it was more about, okay, we can use this information and start changing our messaging a little bit. Maybe we should add another class in on a Tuesday, to sort of bridge the gap between Monday and Wednesday. And it starts to give you insights into things that you just otherwise wouldn't have. Because you have all this anecdotal data of your experiences, but then you're focused on teaching. But this is actual just, okay, these people checked in at this time, and this is the habits that are starting to form. And over time, you get more and more insight into that.
Yeah. Running a business with data is always better than running a business without data. Now, not all data is relevant. And here's an example. Years ago, this is probably 20 years ago, Walmart was able to say that when hurricanes were coming, they sold more strawberry Pop Tarts. That probably doesn't help Walmart make decisions. But if you can get that granular on your data, if you can dig in at that level, you can find all kinds of things that you can take action on. And Brad, I heard you. You said we saw there's need to adjust some scheduling stuff here because of the way I think you said it was Tuesday operated versus Monday and
Mm.
maybe some of the other days. But what I heard was you didn't realize that. Nobody realized that prior to having the data.
No, and it really is about the context as well. Like you're saying context is king for data. It's having the right sort of data and being able to look at it from the right angles as well. But with something that's as simple as attendance, it's really how many people are checking in at what times, and then you sort of know, well, okay, well, I've got 50 slots available in my space, and we're only half filling that on these days, but double, we're sort of oversubscribed on other days. How do we bridge that up? So you can
Now
start working with it then.
there are lots of ways you can get data, and I think what it really comes down to is how much time you want to invest in it. Right?
Mm.
If you want to run your business, any martial arts school is a business. If you want to run your business as effectively as you can, you need data. Now, you can build your own system and track it and have lots of spreadsheets and Google Sheets and there's value to that. Spoiler alert, if you look at my Google Drive, you will see that Whistlekick has dozens of shared documents that we use among the team. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but there are also some things that we do with specific software products that work a lot better because we don't have to invest the time because they are more purpose built. And this is where I want to start to shift and talk about things being more purpose built. I'm Alan, I'm going to throw it to you in a moment, but Victor, I want you to talk about because you and I were almost on this parallel journey. I started my martial arts school not long after you did, and we followed roughly the same track. We managed things in roughly the same way. So you can tell my story as well as yours. When you opened April of 2023, right?
Mm-hmm.
How were you tracking everything?
Oh, Google Sheets. Um, not really. Microsoft Office. I use Excel spreadsheets to track all of that. I used Gmail as far as email lists were concerned. I created here are the list of the students, and then I had a big old folder of hand signed waivers.
Yeah.
Uh, with
I
all
bet
of the original student information.
I bet there are hundreds of people out there nodding their head or at least acknowledging in their mind that's how I was or am doing it now.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, it just like that's how I did it at the previous school, and comparatively to other martial artists that I know who have run schools who use graph paper to, track attendance, or I've been a part of a school that used the card method and I didn't really understand it at all because a lot of times I'd forget to pull my card and class would
Right.
just start.
Right.
Uh, I seemed
So
like I was ahead of the game.
now we have to take a small detour because before we've talked about here's the problem and we are going to talk about a solution here. I don't want you in the audience to think that this is where we switch gears and it becomes sales pitch. It becomes because there's still a lot of information about how you can approach these problems as we talk about a solution. And so we're going to detour now. Alan, how did you meet Brad? How did you guys get going? And bring us up to, just take a couple minutes now and talk about the history of Martialytics.
Yeah. So the genesis of our relationship was kind of along the lines of what I mentioned earlier with my involvement with martial arts in general, right? Just sort of like developing an investment thesis, and that's kind of what I've been doing for the last several years is with a partner investing in kind of small growing businesses that we talk about different inflection points in a business's life that I think might be able to use our different experiences or expertise and capital for business and personal purposes, basically. Like just finding businesses that are at a certain inflection point, and everybody's got a different style of doing that. But that was sort of what we've been doing, and looked at everything in the market, and frankly, didn't think the products in general were that great. Except for Martialytics, I thought it was great, and I was a totally unbiased spectator to this 3 years ago, right? So
There,
at that
there's
point in time,
there's a point where in the story in a little bit where you're going to hear I agreed with that wholeheartedly. Keep going.
okay, yeah. So I mean, basically looked around and talked to a bunch of people and looked at all these different products, and I just thought Martialytics was the best. And then that's part of it, obviously, but you can't do a good deal with a bad person. And
Mm,
so when I actually talked to Brad and his cousin Glenn, who is another co-founder, is still involved in the business every day, I was like, these are great guys. I'd love to work with them,
mm.
and I think we could do a nice job and have a good time. And that was sort of worked out, and that was the start from there. Um, and it's gone great so far. I mean, I think we you know there's value in being there's no put it this way, there's no value in sort of preemptively patting yourself on the back. It's nice to take pride in what you do and try your best, but we're not done, and nobody's we're not going to be done probably ever. We think that we can make the best product in the world for this, and we don't want it to be 10% better, we want it to be 5 times better.
And there's a bit of a martial arts philosophy there, right? Martial arts is never done. Our forms can always be better. Our sparring, our basics, everything can always be better. And there's something, I don't want to say unique, because there are certainly other businesses, not even in this space, but there are plenty of businesses, whether they realize it or not, that take that philosophy to their business. But I think it makes
Mm.
all kinds of sense that, here we have a martial arts related business approaching business with martial arts philosophy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we're really passionate about, and I know it's kind of a niche industry, and these businesses aren't necessarily multinational public corporations or anything like that, but the business problems are real and far-reaching, right? I mean, you talk about, we've talked about payments a bunch, but we've talked about attendance, we've talked about grading. Like there's all these different little things, interacting with parents. How do you communicate? How do you communicate with students? There's all these little facets of the business that matter. They matter to do right. And you talked about sort of what inspires most people to start these martial arts businesses, and none of what you said was I just love doing admin, or I'm passionate about, bookkeeping. That's just not involved, right? And our kind of ultimate vision for this business is how much are we able to restore people and founders of these schools and gyms? How much are we able to restore them to their, not just their total passion, but also their skill set? Generally speaking, it's like, I love teaching martial arts and I'm really good at it. So how
Here's
much
an
can we
important
restore
data
them
point
to
I want to
that?
throw in because you're setting me up for this one, and I don't know that everyone out there knows this. 51% of martial arts schools lose money or break even. Please continue.
Right. Yeah. And so, and that's kind of where we come in, right? It's like, if we can, you know, part of the equation to restoring people to kind of what their passion and what their skill set is taking all of the other stuff, or as much of it as we can, off their plate, and theoretically doing it better, right? So we're going to do this better, faster, cheaper. Normally you only get to pick two of those, but we can do it better, faster, and cheaper. And you can do more of what you love and more of what you're good at, and your school will grow. Like that's the intent, right? That's what we're passionate about, and that's the mission, I would say, of the business. And so when I say we're not done, it's like, you've described, like, you talk about data, right? So like all the time, almost every little aspect of running a business involves data collection. So where does it go? Does it go into a cave somewhere, or what do we do with it, right? So now we're talking about, data exhaust. So sometimes it's meaningless and you can't do anything with it. Like, for example, at salons, there was data recorded for many years, or there were data, whatever. There were data recorded for many years about, sales of certain hairsprays or shampoos or nail polish, doesn't really matter. And it wasn't going anywhere. And then somebody had the bright idea to package it up and sell it to the CPG companies. And now they've got sort of end user data. Well, we need to stock more of this stuff. We need to change the price on this and blah, blah, blah. The same sort of thing happens when you have digital composition of data. You actually can use the data exhaust in much more productive ways. And I'll give you one more thing, just an idea of what we're doing with that next, which is around grading, which I think is an area that is heavily ignored across the industry. When I say the industry, I mean the industry of software providers. And there's, I would say, a lack of detail around skills and assessing skills, right? And so, it's pass fail mostly.
Subjective. What we do as an industry is that there's a strong subjective component. And because of that, a lot of people just went, let's just let it be subjective. But please continue.
Yeah, these pass fail things. And I think that's okay, but you have to break it down into its subcomponents, because when you're looking at somebody who's coming in for a grading, and I've heard this a million times from school operators, you're not just being like, yep, looks good. It's, I need to see this skill or this form or this technique, and I need to see it displayed to a certain level. That part is, very much subjective, right? And so you're going to take a look at that, and that's up to you. And you as the expert need to determine that. But once that's all done, what if I can look at my class and say, okay, the pass rate of these people on skill A was 95%. The pass rate on skill C was 40%. Now I have data that informs my curriculum. So now I can alter my curriculum. So it's like, we can go on about that forever. And as you can tell, it's something that I'm interested in. But it's, as we can get better and take more and sort of take more weight off of people, the value that we can provide and the insights that we can glean should also grow. And there's just more avenues for expansion and improving the product, basically.
Absolutely. Victor, you're up in a moment. I got a question for you. Brad, did Alan leave anything out? Did he?
No, he's spot on. 100%. Just the fact that he said that we're never done is 100% true. We've been doing this business. Well, I've been doing this business for nearly 12 years now. This is our 12th year, and I could easily see another 10 years worth of just upgrades and additions and new features and different things we can tackle. And
Mhm.
it's all about, it all comes down to that jobs to be done. So when you've got your business and you're running it as your school, you've got all these different things you want to do. You've got maybe you've got tournaments you want to run. You might have TVs in the lobby that you want to have content on. You've got all these sorts of things. You've got merchandise and other ways that you can sort of grow your business to that sustainable level so that your business doesn't disappear when times get tough.
Yeah.
And it's just about building it and sort of using those little synergies in a smart way. And if we can help do that using technology, then that's really where we step in.
Yeah. Victor, again, you and I are sort of on these parallel paths with our schools, and spoiler alert, we're both using Martialytics. We're going to talk about how we got there shortly. Has switching over from Google Sheets and other manual processes been a good thing for you as it has been for me?
Yeah, I mean to
Do you
say
only use
to
Martialytics because we know and like these guys, or are
no
there additional benefits?
to say that it has been a good thing is such an underscoring of the of everything. It has solved problems I knew I had. And because when and again I know we'll get there in a second. Like when we were talking about when we first stumbled upon Martialytics, and by we I mean you, and then you had a conversation with me about it. I had already been looking for things. I actually had already had a meeting for my school lined up with a software company the day that you texted me about it. But it also has solved problems that I didn't even know that I had. And it's funny that you talk about Alan talked about how we do gradings and things like that.
Mm,
And every other software company has been running off of what I call the fitness facility model of time in class, and we don't do that. I have a student in particular who he'll disappear for weeks on end because he has family things, and for him
mhm.
training is very important, but for his family it's not the number one priority, and I get and respect that. Under any other school that I've ever been a part of, this would vastly put him behind in his martial arts progression, but he shows up and
Let's acknowledge why, because a lot of us recognize the subjectivity of what we're doing, and time spent in rank is one of the ways that people try to create some objectivity or at least pseudo objectivity in that. Oh, okay, so we think, once you've earned your yellow belt, it's probably going to take you around this long to earn your blue belt. We need to make sure that you come to this many classes because how else is this going to work, right?
right,
So back to you.
right, and yeah, and but that for this like for this student in particular, and there are other students that are newer that have just started with us that I see this. Like I tell them, hey, we don't do belt ranks you know by time. If you know the three parts of your first test, you can test. If you know the three parts of your next test, you can test, because and it's not just like they just have to get through them. They have to know them well. But you have a kid who
Yeah.
he's still taking bill. He's still paying for his tuition, but he just can't make it to classes. But then he'll show up to class, and it's like he's not even skipped a beat. And that's because he's a diligent kid. He's a hard-working
Hmm.
individual.
Hmm.
He's got talent, but also he utilizes another feature that was a problem that I didn't know that I had, that the software that these guys made solve for me, is the fact that my students have an app that they can go
Yeah,
open, they can
I,
click study.
I want to press pause on features, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
You're because we're gonna shift into this,
I
and
figured. Mm-hmm.
yeah, but we're not quite there yet. So here's what happened, and I need this. This is an important part of this story because if you've been around a while, if you know Whistlekick, you know that one of the things that's really important to me is we don't put our logo on anything that sucks. We don't bring out products, we don't bring out services, we don't bring out events that we don't think are a very good value, right? If you take a look at the history of our product lines, you will not see all of the products being claimed to be the best, right? Our sparring gear, our foam sparring gear is by far the best. But some of the other things we made, we were able to do something really good that was a better value. It cost less than other things that were also really good. And that's really where we go. It's about value. And so there was a time, and Victor alluded to this day, where I knew it was time for me to start looking for software because I saw I was having the same frustrations that I would advise my clients, okay, it's time for you to go look to a solution to this problem, right? So it wasn't tracking attendance because we also don't have attendance for grade, but I wanted to know when people were missing classes. I was like, oh, did they miss last week? And I wasn't great about doing the spreadsheet for that. But there was also the money problem. And so I said, okay, I'm going to pretend I don't know what options are out there. And I did a ton of Googling and I had 47 tabs open and I started looking through and attritioning off because I knew about a lot of these products from working with martial arts schools. And I was left with about a half a dozen. And I knew all of them except Martialytics. So I spent some time, making sure that I wasn't forgetting something and looking at these other products. And I took a look at Martialytics and I went, there's just something different about this. There's a refinement to it. There's a polish that I don't see elsewhere. There's I've gotten pretty good at evaluating online things because it's been my career for close to 30 years. And I said, there's something here. There's something different. I can't put my finger on it. Hey, Victor, you're up. And for those of you who don't know, Victor is director of partnerships at whistlekick. So I put it on his plate. I said, I need you to go figure this out. I need you to, it seems like this is a company that we should at least be talking to. And Victor, back to you for that next part.
Yeah. So, like I said, I already had another company that I had been thinking about because it just makes sense. Like we work with school owners. School owners are a big part of a lot of the close orbit of whistlekick audience. And I was like, why aren't we working with one of these software companies? And there were a few of the ones that probably come to mind, which, I reached out on behalf of whistlekick for, but for me as a school owner, I'm like, I'm not even in a place yet where I can start thinking about possibly.
Because a lot of the offerings in this industry they're not inexpensive. I'm not going to call them expensive, but they're not inexpensive.
They're not inexpensive. And when you put this on my plate, like I looked at it, but like I said, I had a meeting already with a company that I had done my own vetting of, and I was like, I'll put a meeting on the books for a week next week because tomorrow. And I had a conversation with a company, and they were the standard, I would say. But then they got into the cost, and the cost was not, it was either I'm paying a lot for things that I don't need, or I'm paying what I can afford, but not getting the one thing that I need.
They were segmenting features by price.
Right. And then after I had already told them that, and this was the nail in their coffin, so to speak, when I told them, like, me as a private school owner, I'm just not there yet. But I was like, hey, I represent this company. I represent whistlekick. I don't know if I talk to you or do I talk to someone else. I think that a lot of our listeners could benefit from you. And the response that I got from them was just the equivalent of, yeah, I'll mention it to someone. Never heard back from this company. Oh, I heard back from them of, well, what if we discount your price for the first 2 months and then it's going to go up to this thing that you already told us that you can't afford. So then a week goes by and I get on the phone with Alan. And the first thing that I notice is that when he starts walking me through the features was that his mock-up school was all Star Wars themed. And if you have listened to me talk at any given moment, I am locked in now at this point because I find that hilarious. And I say this as Karen and I are getting ready to run our Space Katana seminar session number 2 starting this Saturday.
Are you a Star Wars fan too?
Yeah, that was honestly nothing to do with
Yeah, that's all me.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
you. That's you, Brad. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
All right. You guys are not allowed to take a detour into Star Wars right now, please, because
No.
I know
Me.
this can't be a 9 hour episode. All right.
Yeah.
Right. And so as I was listening to Alan, I honestly was listening solely as whistlekick ears. I had
Why?
because I had
Was it
resolved.
because you assumed that it was going to be too
Yeah,
much, too big, too
yeah.
expensive?
I had resolved myself to. I guess we're not there yet. I will live in the purgatory of Google Sheets for another year to 2 years or so. And then as Alan kept talking, I was like, okay, but where's the upsell? Because in
Where's the
my
catch?
147 jobs, most of them had to do with upselling people. Oh, you definitely want almond milk instead of regular milk with that, or you want to get the black card instead of just the standard membership. And I kept waiting for the upsell, and then he started talking about the student app. And I was like, right, but for that I have to pay what? And he goes, no, nothing. Like, no. He's like, all right. And then he skipped to how they structure their pay by number of students. And I started for the first time in our conversation having this thought of, okay, well, now Wolf Martial Arts Victor needs to start thinking about this,
Yeah,
because
and
this
I
looks
want
really
to
good.
I want to press pause on you there, Victor, because I think this is an important point. And yes, this is where I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the features. What I really want the audience to do is check out Martialytics, because you all have different needs. And if you're evaluating software, you're probably evaluating more than one option. But this is a really important thing. And it again, it lines up with what most of us do as martial arts schools. The differentiator in the pricing, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys didn't change this in the last 6 seconds, that it's not based on features, it's based on number of students. So as you help me grow and I have more students and I can afford to pay a little more, I'm paying you more. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Okay.
our goals are aligned with
Goals
yours,
are
so
aligned, our
it's
interests are
yeah.
aligned, and that is such a critical aspect. For those of you out there who have done consulting work with me, you know this is one of my core business philosophies, that if interests of the two sides doing business are not aligned, it's inevitable that something's going to fail because it's unsustainable. So, uh, what, Brad? Why is that the way you all charge? Is it as simple as I just laid it out?
Kind of, yeah. It's mostly because my background's in a small traditional sort of art, and a lot of them are dying out to sort of the bigger,
Yeah.
more popular gyms, BJJ and MMA schools and things like that. The traditional schools tend to be smaller. They have those old school senseis and sifus that just don't want to charge too much, and their students are getting older and that sort of thing. And I really don't want to see those sort of styles die out, really. So it was more about helping those smaller schools and sort of almost not subsidizing them, but having it so that they had the full feature set,
Mm.
but was also able to pay less in a way that sort of made sense to them.
Sure. Sure. All right. So here's what I want to do, because I don't imagine that people out there are going to sit and right. We're not going to do a demo where we don't show things, and we're also not going to do a demo. I think we've done a really good job here talking about the why and the what. But what I want to do now, Victor, I know you mentioned one of your favorite features is a student app. Okay. Honestly, mine is I can so quickly know who's missed a couple classes, so I can reach out to them and find out what's going on. But let's do this. Brad and Allen, I'd like each of you to pick, your favorite two or three things about Martialytics, especially if it's something that isn't, across the board in the industry. And then let's tell the audience what they can do, where they can go to find out more, and the thing that we're doing for them because of our relationship with you guys.
Yeah, our favorites are probably going to be pretty similar. So, Brad, you go ahead first, and I'll follow up.
It's hard for me to say because my favorites are always the next thing that I'm building. So,
What's the
uh,
next thing then? What's coming down the pipe that people might be
the next
excited
thing
about?
is what Alan was talking about with the gradings, having the curriculum management feature where you can get the data from your gradings and then work out what you should do with your curriculum based on that. I think one of my favorite things about the software is so I was on a road trip through Scotland with Glenn, my cousin and business partner who I founded this with. But so he concentrates on all the back end, the development side, and I'm more design side. And that's we've worked together for 30 years basically since we were kids doing little software projects and things. So it was inevitable that we ended up working together. But we were on a road trip through Scotland, and we were somewhere near Glencoe up near Oban on the coast there, and we just started thinking about what if we had more power on our student list, because really the heart of a school is students.
Mhm.
How could we recut that in lots of different ways with filters and sorting and adding tags and having search lists and all that sort of thing, and just sort of packing that into sort of what is a really prominent part of our software because it's on the screen all the time. And then we just had this idea, and before that, it was just a list of students, and you could click on them, and it was great. But you could search them and click on the students. But now you've got this really powerful feature limiting thing, so where you can filter it down to any different way you want, any different tag, age ranges, all that sort of stuff, and then export it or just email all those people in one click. So that's probably my favorite part.
It's
Yeah, it's
there's a
interesting. I mean, I think
granularity here in the
Mm,
software that I'm not used to seeing. I've spent a lot of time again, email and social media and marketing things and um, the way you all built that works kind of the way most people's brains seem to work for these things. I want all the students that are this rank and this age, and you can do that,
mm. Yeah.
and
yeah,
you can
I
go
mean,
so much further.
I remember
Go ahead,
actually
Alan.
that's one of the things that Vic and I talked about when we were, chatting, all those months ago. And I kind of just showed him like a student list a little bit, and I was like, okay, you know, say you want to grab, I want everybody between ages of 7 and 10 that is, you know, in this particular club or doing this particular style, and I want to send them an email. And it's like, doing that historically, I don't know, Vic, if this is, ballpark right, but it might have taken 30 or 40 minutes. You got to find everybody and you can do it in 10 seconds, right? Like you literally just click the two toggles on this little rectangle, column we have on the left side of the home screen, and then you can put the filters on it, and there's an email button. You click the email button and boom, you send them. I mean, it's like little stuff like that we can kind of forget about a little bit as we're kind of building these, whatever sexy or new features. I think probably one of those favorites for me would be the one touch sign up.
Mm.
And if you want to talk about like differentiation, like that is definitely something that, you don't see out there. And the way that I kind of
It's life
describe
changing
that,
for me. It really is.
yeah, okay. So the way that I describe that is like, people talk about the admin headache of collecting student data, payment data, waivers that are signed, and the contact data, basically, next of kin, all this other stuff, emergency contact, right? And just having that all be in one single flow, where instead of me being involved every single time somebody signs up, it's like, go to this link or scan this code and you can do it. You can fill everything out. And all you have to do is you create it once, and then you can do 200 signups or one sign up or five, and it takes you no additional time. And that's a cool thing, I think, too.
Yeah, um, regardless of the software company that we were talking to, right? If we were talking to someone else, we're not going to sit here and go through all of the features because you guys have resources for that and you can do a demo and everything.
Yep.
But I will say point blank, and I think, Victor, I can say this for you too. Moving to a software option is the reason my school is now profitable. Is that fair for your? Okay. And
That's fair.
so the reason that I'm able to say that is because of the pricing. And of course, this pricing could change because who knows when in the future people are watching or listening to this. But Alan, what's the cost on Martialytics right now?
Yeah. Well, like we talked about earlier, that we were all happy about, is that it varies by the number of students you have. And so starting out, if you have less than 50 students, it's $69 a month. And there's some discounting if you want to pay annually up front. Sometimes we have people that do that, right? They'll do it. They'll be members for 2 or 3 months, and then they'll say, "Look, I love this. I'm going to use it for years," and so they'll just pay annually, and there's some discounting and things like that. So it scales up. If you have 200 or more students, there's a cap. It's $199 a month, and so that's the cap.
Cat, that's the most you can pay. Which, okay, just if you think that's a lot comparatively, one, do the math on how much revenue that is at 200 students, and two, I want you to check out the rest of the competitive landscape, the other options that are out there, because that will help you understand how aggressive this pricing is.
And that's only active students as well. So if you've got leads
Sure.
or inactive students, if they're students that have left for a while, they're free. You can store that data forever as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Before we tell people what the offer is, what we're doing, right? And full disclosure, we have a financial arrangement with Martialytics. I'm not going to give you the details of it, but what I think is really important to underscore is we went to them. That's why Victor and I needed to talk about that, because we did. This is not, they didn't just come to us and wave a bag of money and say, "Hey, we want you guys to help us out." That's not at all what happened. We went to them, we spent quite a bit of time in conversation, and we feel that their business ethics line up with our business ethics, that their interest in helping the martial arts world lines up with our interest in helping the martial arts world. And that's why we've been talking, and it's why we're talking today. But Brad and Alan, before we tell everybody the what we've worked out with you, what we hit you with sticks to get you to agree with, as an offer, is there anything? Are we missing anything big for them? Is there anything
no, I
we've
don't
left
think so. I
out?
think jump in and find it for yourself. There's a 30-day free trial, so you can access every feature and start adding students and getting paid before paying us a cent. So
But wait,
that's the best way to do it.
there's more, right,
Mhm.
Victor?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go to our sponsors page, I think it's God, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com.
Correct.
And if you sign up for the trial through there, you guys give 60-day trial through us. So that's 2 months of you growing your business, and it will grow your business if even for the simplest fact that, like, I know for myself, I was giving so much brain power to things that I didn't realize I was giving brain power until all of a sudden I was freed up to think about, well, what if we do this marketing thing?
Right.
Because I wasn't chasing people for billing, or I wasn't using time.
And this is the takeaway here, folks. This is what I really want you to recognize, is that you've got 2 months to figure out if this is a good fit for you. And whether you're using something else or you're not using anything, I think you owe it to yourself to check out Martialytics, because your worst case scenario is that you will find that what you are doing is the best choice for you. And that is a very martial arts philosophy, isn't it? We continually test what we do to make sure that it still is good, whether we're talking about that in terms of competition or our sparring or some freeform self-defense stuff. It's important that periodically we go back to the drawing board and say, are my assumptions correct? If your assumption that you're using this other software product is the best thing for you, just at least check out some of the materials here, because you may find, I didn't know that was something I could do. And that's a really important aspect here. And like Victor said, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, go to the sponsors section at the top, and you'll get threaded through everything. And if they do reach out, Alan, they end up talking to you, right?
Yeah, depending on sort of the time of the day that they're looking, it's either going to be myself or Brad.
Okay, so it's one of the two of you. So
Yeah.
the audience has gotten to know you a little bit. You seem like nice guys. You've always been nice guys when times that
We
I've
try to
talked to
be.
you. So at the very least, you're not evaluating a software product put together by a couple of jerks, right?
Very kind of
The worst thing we could say is that one of them has a strange accent. And depending on where you are in the world, depends on which
You
one
might
has
like
the
that.
strange accent. So
Yeah. Am I the one with the strange accent then?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean,
Definitely.
if they're because we do have a global audience, so if they're in the UK or they're in Australia, yeah, you're probably the one with the strange accent.
Yeah.
So, um, Victor, anything that we should add before we turn the audience loose to go check out Martialytics?
I would say, I like what you said when you keep correlating it back to martial arts. There are so many martial artists that I know that are so open minded when it comes to technique, when it comes to training. But the second that you offer them a different way to do something that could help them, no, not going to do it. Be as open minded about your business as you are about your training. That's what I would add.
That is that is a lovely, succinct way to put it, and I'm so proud of you. That's amazing. Brad, anything else that you want to say to the audience before we wind up here?
Victor has absolutely summed that up, so I don't want to ruin his note.
All right, Alan.
All I'd say is that we're here to talk to you, right? Everybody's business's needs are different. And so come check it out. And if you want to schedule a demo and talk to us about what you've got going on, you know, we'd love to help.
Uh, I think highly of Martialytics, not just because of the product, but because of my efforts to get to know these folks and their business. And I hope that carries some weight with all of you. If you go back in the history of whistlekick, you know a lot about me and how I do business. And this passes muster. And that's the only reason we're talking to them today. Whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. Hit that sponsors link up top. They're going to give you 2 months to check it out instead of one. That's the big thing that we bring you. And gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.